that this man would get saved. It was very difficult for an Indian to bow their knee because they had never been conquered. They had never been defeated. They had never been a people with a leader. They all lived in family groupings and the oldest man reigned. And now he was an altar. And God wonderfully changed his life as his tears splashed on that altar onto the dirt floor. And he gave his heart to the Lord Jesus. He went back to his village and began to preach. Just a few people came. As he would walk down the village trail, some of the men would mock him and say, "There goes God," and they would ridicule him. And they called him names, and they tried to get him to fight, and he would bite his tongue and continue to walk and say nothing. We prayed for him dearly, hoping that he would not let his violence appear. And he didn't. And this went on for some time, and he was a great testimony to those people. And in his village, there was a young boy. A young boy who at the age of 10 came to one of our first vacation Bible schools we had. And he, this 10-year-old boy, gave his heart to the Lord. And in that class, he received one of those little blue New Testaments, like the Gideons pass out. And he put that in his pocket. He won that in that Bible school, and that was a prize to the Indian. For they had no books, and they were just beginning to learn to read. And the first thing in his hands was the New Testament. And he carried that in his pocket. He only had one shirt to his name, one pair of pants. And he carried that little New Testament always in his pocket, everywhere he went. When he would have to cross the stream to go to school, he would take his clothes off, his shirt off, hold his clothes up and swim across the stream, get on the other side, put his clothes back on, go to school, repeat the process on his way home. His mother, Santos, Rosa, and his father, Santos, were not Christians. They would have nothing to do with the church. On Sunday mornings, I remember standing in that old church where this man preached. And I could hear the beating of the drums and the laughing of the women, the high-pitched laughter, until death would fill the air. And on those occasions, their joy turned to great sorrow. For death was a very prominent picture among the Indian. The life expectancy today is only between 43 and 45 years of age. So death is always near. That involves witchcraft. That involves superstitions. That involves the people that have had no hope. No hope for tomorrow. No hope beyond the This lady just came from one of the villages. She's been to the local witch doctor, and the witch doctor's treated the child, but evidently to no avail. She's given him a lot of animals. She has nothing else to give. She knows the child is very ill. She's telling me the child is dying. Probably already has, because many times they come too late. But I need to check it. She knew this child was dead, but it's hard for her to accept that. And she will cry that death cry For you see, in her culture, you do not die from natural causes. You die because you've been bewitched. Someone will have to pay, of course. And once you hear the death cry, you never forget it. To be awakened in the middle of the night to that cry of hopelessness. That cry that beyond the grave. They'll have to watch her because she will go out and try to dig up that rip poison barbasco and take her life. She might run to the stream and wrap a vine around her neck and leave from a rock and hang herself. They'll have to care for her for days. Her husband will have to trail her and follow her around to make sure that she doesn't do that. We see the only belief system they have is that you might be reincarnated someday in the form of an animal, and that's all. And so life among those people has been very, very difficult. But Lucho preached about someone who could change all of that. For he met him at an altar of prayer. And in his Sunday school, the little Sunday school he had with just a few people, was this little 10-year-old boy who had gotten saved during vacation Bible school. And this 10-year-old boy would come and he would color little papers with crayons patiently. He had artistic ability, and he would paint these in, and then he would take them home to his hut. And his dad would take a blowgun dart and pin those on the wall of their little bamboo hut. And you'd walk into his house, you'd see all those old Sunday school papers painted that the child had done very painstakingly in beautiful pictures. And the house was decorated. The only decorations in that home, by the way. For 2 years, he listened to that man preach. That rugged man who had now been saved. He learned a great deal from this man. He knew the history of this man. His father and people told him. And at the age of 12 one day, I looked out of our clinic window and I saw a canoe coming down the river. The people in it were frantic. Something had happened. I opened the clinic door and I looked out and I saw a father carrying a son in his arms up the hillside to the clinic's door. The mother stepped out of the canoe and she was crying as she came along beside the husband. She was crying and saying essentially what we heard tonight: my son is dying, my son is dying. Mino uchi, shin, hawe. And she came to the clinic with her husband. She was beating her chest and pulling at her hair. She was so intense and distraught about her firstborn son being so sick. And they came into the clinic, and the son, we placed him on a table. I looked into the face of this boy and I thought, Lord, it doesn't seem right. Here he's been in church 2 years, and his mom and dad care nothing about church and God. And there I saw in his pocket that little New Testament. Thank the Lord for those who pass out New Testaments to people who desperately need them. And I looked at the boy, and it was evident what he had. His jaws were fixated. He couldn't hardly move them. They were locked. His back was hyperextending. I asked the father, what happened? He said, my son was running through the jungle 9 days ago, and he stepped on a sharp bamboo shoot that had been sticking out of the ground, and it went into the depths of his foot. But he didn't tell us anything about this until just a couple of days ago. And we noticed him limping, and his mother asked him what was wrong, and we saw his foot was infected and festered. Today, he couldn't hardly talk, and so we brought him to the clinic. And right away, it was a diagnosis of tetanus. And it was too late. I didn't have the antitoxin at that time. Well, I told them, take your son home. He's not going to live. I was sad along with them. The mother cried, and she said, isn't there anything you can do? And I thought in desperation, the only thing we can offer is that we can take him upriver to the army camp to see if the Peruvian army doctor has the antitoxin for tetanus. And our boat sped away, taking that family to the army camp. We were quite sad that day because we were preparing to send our children off to school, and we knew we would not see them for months. And we were packing their little suitcases up and getting them ready, and the next day we set out in that large dugout boat, and we made our way slowly up the Marañón River. The Marañón, how many of you have ever been to the Marañón? Some of you have, haven't you? How we enjoyed having Ricky and his wife with us. Thank you for sending them. Thank you for allowing them to be a part of us, and for the support you gave, and for the prayers that you prayed, and for the one, and the shop was not nearly that big, folks. Don't let him kid you, it's a little dinky thing. But we appreciate so much your investment in mission. I just heard at the table about your young people. What a wonderful thing you're doing. May God richly bless you as we share him with others. Here or across the seas, it matters not, as long as we share him. And so we are privileged to be here tonight. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity just to share with you a little bit about your work and what God is doing in another part of the world called the Amazon. It's found, it's my favorite verse, and it's found in Acts chapter 1:8. You know that by heart. We don't even have to read it, do we? But ye shall receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea, Samaria, and then in the old King James, that lovely word that we've kind of lost in all the translations, the uttermost. That's where we live. The uttermost. Ask Ricky, he'll tell you. We took him to Sodom and Esau. I don't know if he thought he'd ever get back. And the uttermost. Aren't you glad that God shares with the people even in the uttermost? I almost thought we were going to the uttermost today, coming here. It's a long way. Beautiful country. My goodness, it's beautiful. And looking back here, if you take out the pine trees, the cedar trees would almost remind me of one of our rivers up the Amazon. That great, great frontier. You know what's one of the last frontiers left to us today? 2,000 tributaries feet. 17 of those over 1,000 miles long. You know, the Amazon is so mighty that it dumps enough water into the Atlantic Ocean in 3 hours it would fill Lake Ontario. In 24 hours it dumps enough water in the Atlantic that it would supply every American household for 5 months. An incredible river. And we live on the Marañón, the headwaters of the Amazon. Fast-rolling river. And these men were headed for certain destruction. Their canoe was fast picking up speed. The man in the back of that canoe was steering it and trying to find some sight of the men. And the night was so black and they had no light. And the boy in the front, his eyes were dilated bigger than saucers and wondering, what am I doing in this canoe? But it was too late to bail out. It was too deep and too swift. And hang on he did. And he looked and he peered out of that night and could see nothing. And he could hear now the roar of the river down below him. The man in the back skillfully maneuvered that craft, cutting the currents back and forth, searching, looking. And now they could hear the water crashing across the rocks. They could almost feel the spray. They knew that they didn't catch up to that canoe soon.